I've always thought Persona 3 Reload was an easy game. Using the Velvet Room, you can literally create God. And with access to some of the most broken personas in the game, it's downright impossible to lose. But what if these features were taken away from me? Is it possible to beat Persona 3 Reload without the Velvet Room? Before we get started, let's take a look at the rules. Rule number 1, no Velvet Room. I think this goes without saying, but anything involving the Velvet Room, whether it be fusion or use of the compendium, is off limits. Rule number 2, only the MC can be in the party at all times, unless otherwise is required. Without this rule, this wouldn't even be a challenge, and this is because your party members get some pretty broken traits. The best example of this is Yukari, who unlocks a trait to use healing spells at 25% of their original SP cost. And don't even get me started on theurgies. And rule number 3, the game must be played on the hardest difficulty. And to abide by the third rule, the hardest difficulty here is merciless. And now, let's get started. And as if things aren't creepy enough, we find a boy named Pharos, and he makes us sign a contract with our name. Shortly after, we meet Mitsuru and Yukari, and the next morning, Yukari shows us our new school. After school we meet Junpei, and a couple days later, shit hits the floor. Because of this, we awaken to our persona, Orpheus. After the fight though, we wake up in a hospital after passing out, we then receive our very own evoker after talking to Mitsuru, and then we head into Tartarus. For this Tartarus trip, Junpei and Yukari are forced onto my party, but this won't be an issue because every time this happens, I will just have them guard until they die. And of course, the only exception for this is when I have to perform an all-out attack, and after this all-out attack, I get my first persona, Tartarus. Shuffle time will also be our only way to acquire new personas. I then leave Tartarus, and then I head to Officer Kurosawa's shop. Then I'm able to go back to Tartarus, and I'm also able to remove my party members. I then recruit Pixie, and then I have to go hang out with Kenji. I do this once and only once because social links are rendered useless because I'm not able to use the Velvet Room. And now it's time for the most important part of this run, the arcade. But why is it important? The arcade is important because it allows me to increase a persona's stats. In each arcade visit, it's raised by 3 points, but this is limited to the strength, magic, and agility stat. Then I go back to Tartarus, and during this time, I recruit Angel and I reach level 7. With this, I went to attempt the floor boss, and it wasn't so bad as long as I made good use of my odd morsels with a little bit of luck. And the luck factor comes from this dodge, which won me the fight. It's then time to do the shifting tutorial, and I had to bring Junpei for this, but it wouldn't even matter because he got jumped instantly. After this, I recruit Silky, and Pixie reaches level 5 and learns Tarukaja and Zio. This will be important in a little bit. I then take on the floor 11 boss, and it wasn't even a challenge. Orpheus' Agi and Angel's Garu is more than enough to do the job here. After this, I find the Garula skill card, which will be a game changer for these upcoming fights. I teach this to Angel, and then I go to the floor 17 boss, and Pixie's Tarukaja and Zio is more than enough to do the job here as well. I then reach the border floor, and now it's time to get stronger for the fight with the priestess. An unhealthy amount of arcade visits later, I think I'm ready to take on this boss. But before that, I buy the 2 SP restorative chocolates from Amazing Commodities, and now I think it's time to do this. After we hop on the monorail, I take care of the mini bosses, and then it's time to take on the actual boss itself. For the main fight itself, Angel's killer magic stat is the deciding factor here, and with the stat this high this early in the game, it's hard to even call this fight a challenge. Using the Phornius I recruited back in Tartarus, I used Tarukaja, and his ice resistance makes this a lot easier to pull off. Then followed by Tarukaja, I used Garula, and this does some big damage. And because I got a Zio skill card, the minions aren't even an obstacle, just an annoyance. And luckily, towards the end, I was able to win this fight.
Angel!
Hold up. Some of you may have noticed that Junpei and Yukari's SP bars are a little used up, but why? Did I break the second rule? Or is there more to it than that? Well, it turns out that when party members level up, their total stats increase. This also applies to SP. Let's say Yukari has 50 SP max, then she goes from level 3 to 5, increasing this number to hypothetically 58. Until I exit the Dark Hour or restore Yukari's SP, it will remain the same place it started. So no, I did not cheat, but I wanted to clear any confusion that may have risen. Long explanations aside, we stop the train, and that concludes this full moon mission. After the mission, we get access to Elizabeth's request, and these are fair game because I'm not technically going in the Velvet Room. I then go to Tartarus where the next block opens up. I then recruit Omoakane, Unicorn, and Jack Frost. On top of that, I was also able to recruit Chimera and Anmaraki. Then I leave Tartarus and study because Mitsuru rewards you based on how well you did on exams. Then Akihiko tells us about a student who went missing. After that, I go to Tartarus and now I want to attempt the floor boss. This mini boss isn't anything to write home about, especially if you have the right coverage, being Garu and Bufu skills. I'm then rewarded with a Miragi skill card, so I give it to Angel and then I leave Tartarus. Before heading back to Tartarus, I buy the apron from Amazing Commodities, and this is a better protector than anything I've had so far. And with this, it's time for the next mini boss. Again, nothing to write home about. The tables do specialize in using poison though, so take them out, and then use Zeo on the main enemy to win. Of course, it wasn't that easy because there's another forced encounter. Luckily, it wasn't that bad. The dice does specialize in using Revolution to increase its critical rate chance, but otherwise it wasn't too much of a challenge. It did inflict distress a couple times. To avoid being crit though, I just guarded. And just like that, 2 easy mini bosses down. On the way to the next mini boss, I recruit Inugami, who I'll be using to defeat this one. And this next mini boss is no other than the Clairvoyant Relic. And because it hits like an absolute truck, I'm gonna have to poison stall it to win. Fast forward to exams, and I have no problems at all. I received my reward from Mitsuru, which in this case happens to be a few incenses. Many arcade visits later, and Angel's looking pretty jacked for this next full moon mission. Before the full moon, Yukari wants Junpei and I to go to that spot behind Pora Island Station, and for whatever reason, we agree. Junpei gets punched, and before things get bad, Shinji comes to save us. He then tells us that Fuka has gone missing, and we conclude that she may be stuck in Tartarus. While searching for Fuka, the boys and I get split up and I wake up alone. Pharos makes yet another creepy appearance, and we find the boys and Fuka. Back at the entrance of Tartarus, we find Yukari and Mitsuru getting attacked by the 2 shadows, and now it's our turn to do something about it. And Fuka also awakens to her persona. Thankfully, these 2 bosses actually have weaknesses, unlike many of the boss fights later in the game, but regardless, we use Fuka's scan, we hit their weaknesses, and many turns later, these bosses go down. After saving Fuka, we then leave Tartarus, and we're one step closer to putting an end to the Dark Hour.